Hello Golden State Warriors fans. We are here once again to bring you the latest news related to our team, and I would like to emphasize how committed we are to improving our performance to achieve great results. Before we dive into this intriguing news, I kindly request you to show your support by clicking the like button, and if you are not yet subscribed to our channel, I invite you all to join us on an exciting journey. Remember to turn on notifications so you don't miss anything.
1 week changed everything for Golden State. And suddenly, one veteran addition looks even more essential than anyone expected. The Warriors have long searched for a center who can hit threes, space the floor, and maximize Stephen Curry. Quinton Post has partially matched that profile, but the article says his defensive limitations have been exposed recently. Post is still viewed as a key long-term piece, but the article says Al Horford fits what the Warriors need better right now. After a turbulent start with Golden State, Horford has adapted well. His three-point shooting, high-level defense, and ability to find the open man are described as essential. Here's the wild part. Post and Horford have nearly identical offensive production. Post is averaging 8 points per game and shooting 35.2% from three. Horford is averaging 7 points and shooting 35.5% from deep. You might be thinking, if the offense is similar, how different can it really be? The article says the defensive impact is drastically different. In 40 minutes with Horford alongside Curry, Moody, and Draymond Green, the Warriors posted a 94.3 defensive rating and a 134.9 offensive rating. In 170 minutes with Post in the same formation, the defensive rating rises to 119.6 and the offensive rating drops to 115.2. Since Christmas, the Warriors are plus 113.9 with Horford on the floor. With Post, they're 7.9. Horford is 39 and is limited to about 24 minutes per game. He will also sit at least one game on back-to-backs, so Post is still needed. Now the Draymond Green part, the article says Draymond benefits from the spacing both players provide, and even more from Horford's defense. Playing center has always been a burden for Draymond. Horford helps reduce that burden. This season, the Warriors are 17-9 when Draymond scores fewer than 10 points. More importantly, they're 7-2 when he has more than 7 assists and 11-5 when he has fewer than 3 turnovers. The article says three-point shooting around Draymond and Horford or Post is crucial. Curry's production is almost guaranteed, but the supporting cast often decides how far the Warriors go. Since January 13th, Moses Moody has made 33 threes, tied for 4th in the NBA in that span, while averaging more than 15 points per game. The article says that Serge helped keep the Warriors competitive after Butler's injury. Now the fifth starter dilemma. The Warriors need to decide a fifth starter, and the article says that could become clearer after the trade deadline if the lineup changes drastically with a Giannis Antetokounmpo acquisition. For now, the two obvious options are Brandon Podziemski and Jonathan Kuminga. Podziemski adds playmaking, while Kuminga adds size, athleticism, and rim pressure. Kuminga hasn't played any minutes with Curry, Moody, Draymond, and Horford. But Podziemski has, and the early results are convincing. In 23 minutes with that quartet, Podziemski lineups posted a 123.5 offensive rating and a 71.2 defensive rating. Small sample, but it has worked so far. With Kuminga still recovering from the injury he suffered last Thursday in Dallas, Podziemski gets the first shot. The article says he will have the chance to start and test those numbers Friday night against a tough Detroit Pistons team. And that opportunity on Friday night matters, because it's more than just one start. It's a real-time experiment. It's the Warriors taking those early lineup numbers and seeing if they hold up when the game is actually on the line. The article calls the sample small, but it also calls the early results convincing. That's the tightrope Golden State is walking right now. They don't have the luxury of endless time, but they also can't ignore what's working. And what's working, according to the article, starts with Horford's presence next to Curry, Moody, and Draymond, because the Warriors have been searching for this type of spacing big for a long time. Not just someone who can stand behind the arc, but someone who can do it while defending at a high level and making the right pass when the defense collapses. That's why the comparison to Quinten Post is so important. Post is giving them the idea of the same offense, but the article says the defensive impact is where the separation becomes obvious. It's not an indictment of Post's future. The article still calls him a long-term piece. It's a statement about right now. And right now, Horford's minutes are the ones that change the shape of the team. But the article also warns you there's a limit to how much the Warriors can lean on him. He's 39, he's capped around 24 minutes, and he's going to miss at least one game on back-to-backs. So Golden State doesn't get to choose between Horford and Post completely. They need both. They need Horford to set the standard and stabilize the defense, and they need Post to survive the minutes Horford can't play while continuing to develop. That's why the fifth starter question is so critical. Because once you accept that Horford and Post will both be in the mix, the next variable becomes who completes the five-man unit around Curry, Moody, and Draymond. And the article lays out the trade-off in simple terms. Podziemski gives more playmaking. Kuminga gives size, athleticism, and pressure at the rim. Those aren't just stylistic differences. They change the personality of the lineup. Podziemski suggests a more connective, decision-heavy group. Kuminga suggests a more physical, rim-attacking approach. The article also points out that Kuminga hasn't played any minutes with the Curry, Moody, Green, Horford quartet. So in this specific lineup conversation, Kuminga is still hypothetical. Podziemski isn't. He's already been on the floor with that group, and the Warriors' ratings in those 23 minutes are the evidence the article keeps coming back to. So Friday becomes a pressure test for the evidence group. And because Kuminga is still recovering from the injury in Dallas, Podziemski is the one who gets the runway first. That's the short-term story. But the article also hints at how quickly the long-term story could change. It says the fifth starter evaluation might become clearer after the trade deadline, because the lineup could change drastically if Golden State manages to acquire Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's not presented as something guaranteed. It's presented as the kind of move that would reshape everything if it happens. So for now, the Warriors are operating in the present reality. Horford is the better fit, Post is still necessary, and the fifth starter spot is a real debate between two very different skill sets. And the most important connective piece, according to the article, is the shooting around Draymond and whichever big is on the floor. Curry's production is almost guaranteed, but the supporting cast decides how far the Warriors can push. That's why the Moses Moody stretch is included. 33 made threes since January 13th, tied for fourth in the NBA in that span, while averaging more than 15 points per game. The article credits that surge with keeping Golden State competitive after Butler's season-ending injury, which is another way of saying the Warriors' margin now depends heavily on who hits shots around Curry. So if Podziemski can stabilize the lineup and keep the defense sharp, it strengthens the case for that five. And if the spacing plus Horford's defense continues to lighten Draymond's burden, it strengthens the case for the whole structure. Because the article's message is that Horford isn't just another name on the roster. He's the piece that makes the Warriors' preferred idea work, especially after Butler went down. Now Golden State has to prove it holds up in real games, not just in small samples. And Friday night is the next chance to do exactly that. Even Draymond Green doesn't know what to say anymore as the Giannis trade rumors keep getting louder. Warriors fans are waiting on the same two questions that won't go away. Are they actually going to land Giannis Antetokounmpo before the deadline? And if they do, will it cost Draymond? Right now, nobody knows for sure. And that includes Draymond himself. On his podcast, The Draymond Green Show, Green said he has no idea if a trade is going to happen. He made it clear he knows as much as everyone else. And that honesty matters, because Golden State is being mentioned as one of the leading teams in the race for Antetokounmpo. Reports say the Warriors are willing to make an aggressive offer for the 31-year-old superstar. The reason is obvious. The organization wants to do whatever it can to win another championship with Stephen Curry. And as much as they'd love to keep Draymond as part of that mission, the reality is painful. He could end up being included in the package. The money alone shows why this gets complicated fast. Jimmy Butler is making $54.1 million this season, the same amount as Giannis. Draymond makes $25.8 million, so if Golden State wants the simplest path to matching salaries, including Butler is the most direct move. But that doesn't mean Butler would be the only player involved. It could be Draymond plus other players too, and when it comes to Giannis, the article makes one thing clear. The only untouchable player is Curry. Draymond understands that. Even if he'd love the idea of playing with Antetokounmpo, he also knows his role could end up being to help Golden State bring Giannis to the Bay. Draymond says he doesn't know if the Warriors will trade for Giannis. The front office doesn't keep Draymond involved in every decision. Trades, signings, draft picks. That's not how it works. And even if he did know how close the Warriors were to landing Giannis, the article suggests he wouldn't talk about it on his podcast. Or at least, he shouldn't. Still, the article points to something interesting about how these moments usually play out. If the Warriors truly did complete a deal for Antetokounmpo, you'd expect they'd contact Draymond before the official announcement. The article compares it to a moment in 2024, when Tim Connolly reportedly went to Karl Anthony Towns' house to tell him about the Knicks-Timberwolves trade shortly before Woj reported it. It wouldn't be an easy conversation, but the point is, it also wouldn't come out of nowhere. Because this isn't a secret. The entire league knows Golden State wants Giannis. The article emphasizes that the Warriors aren't quietly negotiating in the shadows. Draymond knows it, the roster knows it, and the rest of the NBA knows it. And with the deadline approaching, the waiting becomes personal. According to the article, Draymond and the rest of the roster, everyone except Steph, will know within the next 6 days whether they're still in San Francisco, at least through the end of the season. And if Milwaukee doesn't trade Giannis before the deadline, the conversation doesn't disappear. It simply shifts. The fight for a starting spot and the larger Giannis sweepstakes would ramp back up during the summer. But one thing is certain no matter how this unfolds. If Draymond ever leaves, whether soon or later, it won't be a clean goodbye. What he means to the franchise and to the fan base is beyond value, and a trade wouldn't change that. And that's why this rumor cycle feels heavier than a normal deadline conversation. Because it isn't just about adding a superstar. It's about what Golden State might have to give up to even get in the room. The article makes it clear that Curry is the only untouchable name in any Giannis discussion. Everything else, at least in theory, becomes negotiable once you start talking about a player of that level. And Draymond knows it. That's what makes his no idea quote on the Draymond Green show hit differently. It's not a denial. It's not a tease. It's the reality of being a player, while the front office weighs decisions that can reshape careers and legacies overnight. Even someone as central to the franchise as Draymond isn't sitting in the room when every call is made. Then you add the salary structure, and the stakes get even more real. Butler making $54.1 million the same as Giannis creates the cleanest salary match path on paper. But the article stresses that cleanest doesn't mean simple, because matching money is only the start. It doesn't guarantee the deal is centered on one player, and it doesn't mean Draymond can't be part of it. With Draymond at $25.8 million, the article leaves the door open to another possibility. Draymond plus other players. And that's where fans start to split emotionally. Some fans will focus on the idea of Giannis next to Curry and immediately see the upside. Others will get stuck on what it could cost, especially if it means losing someone who represents the identity of the entire era. That's the mixed reality the article points toward without trying to soften it. It also explains why the next stretch is going to feel tense inside the locker room. The article says Draymond and the rest of the roster, other than Curry, will know within the next 6 days whether they'll still be in San Francisco through the end of the season. 6 days is not a long time, but it's long enough for uncertainty to hang over everything. And that's why the article brings up how teams sometimes handle these moments. If something actually happened, if the Warriors truly landed Giannis, there's an expectation they would reach out to Draymond before it becomes public. Not because he makes the decision, but because he would deserve to hear it directly. The example with Tim Connolly and Karl Anthony Towns is used to highlight that part of the NBA experience. Sometimes, these things become real so fast that the personal side can't keep up. But the article argues this one wouldn't come out of nowhere, because Golden State's interest in Giannis is public and the league knows it. The Warriors aren't operating in silence. This isn't a stealth operation. It's a well-known pursuit, and that's part of why the anticipation is so intense. Everyone is waiting for the same moment. Either Milwaukee pulls the trigger before the deadline, or it doesn't. And the article says if it doesn't, the story isn't dead. It simply moves to the summer, where the Giannis sweepstakes could come roaring back. So the deadline becomes a fork in the road. If a deal happens now, it forces immediate answers about who stays and who goes. If it doesn't, the Warriors go forward with what they have, and the conversation returns later with even more momentum. Either way, the repercussions are obvious. For the Warriors, it's about how far they're willing to push to get one more championship in the Curry era. For Draymond, it's about living inside a rumor that directly involves his future, while publicly admitting he doesn't know what's coming. And for fans, it's the hardest part of all. If Draymond leaves, it won't feel like a normal transaction. The article says what he represents to the franchise and the fan base is priceless, and that doesn't change just because the league calls it a trade. So even in the best-case scenario, landing Giannis, there's a real chance the emotional cost is enormous. And that's why this storyline feels like it's about more than a deadline deal. It's about the end game of an era, and who is still standing when the next version of the Warriors finally takes shape. Warriors fans are going to love what Giannis's draft value vote of confidence says about Golden State's leverage right now. Just like the rest of the league, the Golden State Warriors' entire trade deadline outlook has been flipped on its head by the possibility that Giannis Antetokounmpo could become available. The feeling around the NBA is that it might finally be time, whether it happens now or next season, for Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks to go their separate ways. And this is the exact moment Golden State has been quietly waiting for. For a long time, the Warriors have held on to tradable pieces with one big idea in mind. If a true superstar ever hit the market, they wanted to be ready. Well, that moment may be here, and Golden State can finally move from preparing to actually pouncing. Of course, the bidding war will be fierce. Multiple teams are already expected to come with aggressive offers. But Brad Botkin of CBS Sports argues the Warriors may have the most tempting package of all if they're willing to empty the vault. If the Warriors go all in, they can outbid almost anyone. Here's the key advantage. Future draft picks from Golden State could be among the most valuable in the league. Why? Because when Stephen Curry eventually retires, the Warriors are widely expected to decline, especially without a strong young core already in place. That possibility is exactly what makes those future first-rounders so scary for other teams, and so attractive for a franchise like Milwaukee if it's forced to choose a direction. That's also why Golden State has been so reluctant to move those picks in recent years. They know how valuable they are. But Botkin's point is simple. The Warriors may not have the most elite young talent to offer, yet their draft capital could still put them at the front of the line for Giannis. In the scenario described, Golden State could stack multiple first-round picks across future years, add swaps, and even look for ways to unlock additional swap value through more moves, basically building a package that's hard to match. The trade-off is brutal, though. A move like that could leave Golden State without full control of its own first-round pick for years, stretching deep into the future, even beyond the current time frame of Curry's contract. And by the time that long timeline plays out, Giannis, who is already 31, would likely be past his prime, if not potentially out of the league. So yes, it's powerful, but it's also a massive gamble. Who else is in the mix? Botkin names the Miami Heat, Minnesota Timberwolves, and New York Knicks as key teams to watch. But each comes with limitations in this framing. The Knicks become a real threat only if Giannis specifically signals he wants New York, because they don't have the same stash of future picks. The Heat may be able to compete with young talent, but they don't match Golden State's draft war chest. The Timberwolves' path is described as more complicated, requiring multiple moves to bring draft capital back to Minnesota first. The big takeaway for Warriors fans, Golden State is one of the few teams that can realistically strike immediately and potentially overwhelm the field if the front office decides this is the moment to go all in. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed, and it doesn't mean it's painless, but at minimum, Warriors fans should be energized by this. If Giannis truly becomes available, Golden State won't be watching from the sidelines. They have the kind of draft leverage that can swing the entire conversation in their favor, if they're willing to use it. And that's why this vote of confidence in the Warriors' draft assets matters so much. Because it isn't praise for Golden State's current young core. It's the opposite. It's the idea that the most valuable thing the Warriors can offer is what happens after Stephen Curry is gone. And that's an uncomfortable truth for fans, even if it creates massive leverage in trade talks. The article's logic is brutally simple. When Curry inevitably retires, the Warriors are expected to decline. Not because anyone wants that to happen, but because the team doesn't have a strong young foundation that clearly protects them from a downturn. And that's exactly why future Warriors picks can be viewed as premium currency. The farther out those picks go, the more uncertainty they carry, and the more valuable they can become to a team trying to reset its timeline. That's why the Warriors have been so hesitant to move those picks in recent years. They understand what they are giving away. But the Giannis possibility changes the emotional math. The article says Golden State has been waiting for a moment like this, even keeping tradable pieces in place with the hope that an elite superstar would become available. Now that the door might finally be open, the Warriors can actually act instead of just preparing. And Botkin's argument is that if the Warriors choose to empty the vault, no other team really has an answer. Not because the Warriors have the best player package, but because they can overwhelm the conversation with draft value. That's the part Warriors fans will latch on to. The idea that Golden State can win the bidding war if it truly wants to. But the article also makes it clear what that would cost. It's not just a couple picks and a handshake. The scenario described involves first-round picks spread across multiple years, plus swaps, plus the possibility of using other mechanisms to generate even more assets. The end result is a future where Golden State loses control of its own first-round pick for a long time. And that's the consequence people will argue about. Because on one side, fans will say, if Giannis is available, you do whatever it takes. On the other side, fans will look at that timeline and see the risk of being locked into years of uncertainty. The article draws that timeline out for a reason. It says Golden State could be left without full control of its first-round pick until 2033. That's 6 full seasons after Curry's current contract ends, and by then, Giannis, already 31, would likely be past his peak, or possibly even retired. So the Warriors would be paying for Giannis now, with the possibility of pain much later. That's the gamble in its purest form. It's also why the other teams listed matter. Miami can bring young talent, but the article says it doesn't have the same level of draft capital to match Golden State's war chest. New York only becomes a real threat if Giannis makes it clear he wants to be there, because the Knicks don't have enough future picks to simply outbid everyone. And Minnesota's path is described as complicated. The Timberwolves would need a chain of trades just to bring draft capital back before they could even make a clean run at Giannis. So when you zoom out, the article is essentially saying this: there are many teams interested, but only a few teams are positioned to strike immediately. And Golden State is one of them. That's why, even before anything actually happens, Warriors fans have a reason to be energized. Because this isn't a situation where Golden State has to hope it can compete in the bidding. If the Warriors decide this is the moment to go all in, the article argues they have the kind of draft leverage that can reshape the entire market. And the biggest repercussion is that once that market shifts, everything else shifts with it. The Warriors' deadline changes. Other teams' plans change. And the conversation around Giannis stops being who has the best young players and becomes who has the picks that will matter most when Curry is gone. That's the leverage. That's the risk, and that's why this moment feels different from every other rumor cycle the Warriors have lived through in recent years.